There's a stillness at the beginning of The Long Riders, not of peace, but of calculation. A group of men on horseback glide through open country like shadows pulled from the past, each of them mirroring the other in posture, gait, and bloodline. This isn't a Western built on fiction. It's one stitched together from inheritance. Released in 1980 under the direction of Walter Hill, The Long Riders tells the story of Jesse James and his infamous gang, but it does something more radical underneath. It casts real-life brothers to portray historical brothers. The Keach brothers, the Carradines, the Quaids, the Guests. The result isn't just a casting decision, it's a cinematic experiment in shared memory, and with that experiment came unexpected consequences. The production didn't unfold as planned. Behind the iconic slow-motion shootouts and period-accurate wardrobe lay a chaotic tangle of off-script injuries, buried egos, live gunfire, and a score that was nearly scrapped at the last moment. Horses behaved like actors behaved like outlaws. Some scenes were rewritten on the spot. Others were never supposed to happen at all. What emerged was a film that doesn't just depict the past, it seems to have been haunted by it. The performances are restrained, but beneath them brews something unspoken, the kind of tension that doesn't come from dialogue, but from legacy. And when the frame slows down, you can almost see what's hiding just outside the lens, something too strange, too messy, and too true to be planned. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Long Riders. 1,980. Fact, Hasson, this wasn't casting, it was blood selection. When producers assembled the cast of The Long Riders, they didn't hold traditional auditions, they assembled family trees. 6 sets of real-life brothers took on the roles of historical outlaw siblings, creating one of the most uncanny ensemble casts in Hollywood history. The Keaches portrayed Jesse and Frank James. The Carradines took on the younger brothers. The Quaids became the Millers. Even the Guest brothers joined the lineup as the Ford Boys. This idea didn't come from the studio. It originated with the Keach brothers, who had long envisioned a Jesse James film that would blur the line between legacy and performance. When Walter Hill signed on, he embraced the concept completely, but the dynamic created something volatile. Tension between siblings, both personal and professional, began to bleed through the production. Scenes rehearsed one way were performed another. Brothers corrected each other on camera. In one case, a heated argument over dialogue turned into a standoff that delayed shooting by hour. For the audience, the chemistry was seamless, but on set, it was combustible. Fact #2. The horses didn't understand English. They needed a time machine. Authenticity was everything on The Long Riders, and that extended to how the horses were trained. Rather than using modern riding commands, the animal handlers taught the horses to respond only to period-accurate 19th century cues, phrases, intonations, and gestures specific to the Civil War era. This decision came with complication. Actors had to relearn commands phonetically. Subtle variations in tone or timing could throw off a performance. David Carradine, in particular, struggled to get his horse to move during early takes until he realized he was emphasizing the wrong syllable of a phrase last used in 1872. The result was worth it. The horses moved with eerie realism. Their reactions were less mechanical, more lived in, but they weren't just animals anymore. They were unpredictable performers. And sometimes, they didn't care for the script. Fact #3. A stunt so dangerous, it technically never happened. In the film's most intense shootout sequence, one stunt became the talk of the production. A man jumps through a second-story window and lands onto a moving horse below a feat that looks choreographed but was executed under conditions too risky for insurance coverage. Stunt coordinator Terry Leonard pushed for authenticity. No safety cables, no soft landings, just the raw physicality of man versus gravity. The rehearsal went smoothly, but during filming, the stunt performer overshot the saddle and was dragged nearly 2 car lengths before rolling free into the dirt. He was hospitalized with fractures and deep contusions. The studio's legal team was furious. The footage, Walter Hill kept it. He later said it was one of those moments where the danger was real, and so was the storytelling. They tried to erase it on paper, but it's still in the final cut. Fact #4. They didn't act like outlaws, they lived like them. Stacy and James Keach didn't just perform as Jesse and Frank James, they embodied them, often long after the cameras stopped rolling. In a move that unsettled some of the crew, the brothers agreed privately to remain in character throughout the entire production, even during breaks, blocking, or down days. They addressed each other by their characters' names. They used 19th century speech in casual conversation. More than once, they ignored assistant directors who gave modern instructions, only responding when addressed in period-appropriate phrasing. It started as method. It evolved into something more ritualistic. Crew members members became uneasy. One grip later said, "It felt like we were in their world, not the other way around." The Keach brothers insisted it helped keep the tone of the film consistent. Others believed it was about control. Whether it was commitment or dominance, the result was unmistakable. The James brothers weren't being portrayed, they were present. Fact #5. The original music was scrapped 3 days before the mix and erased from history. Music was supposed to be the last step in post-production. But when the studio composer delivered a lush, romantic orchestral score for The Long Riders, Walter Hill had a visceral reaction. He hated it. The music was too noble. Hill said too clean for a film about betrayal, brotherhood, and blood. With less than a week before final sound mixing, Hill made a drastic choice. He threw out the entire score. He called in Ry Cooder. Cooder, known for his earthy, roots-based sound, composed a raw new soundtrack in a matter of days using period instruments, live performances, and natural room acoustics. The result was rough, eerie, intimate, something that sounded lived in, not polished. The original composer's work? Gone. No backups, no alternate track. Not even in the archives. Some scores live forever. This one didn't even survive the cutting room floor. Fact #6. Carradine didn't miss his mark. He rewrote the scene with his fists. There's a saloon scene in The Long Riders meant to end with a clean exit. David Carradine's character was supposed to fire 2 warning shots, exchange words, and walk out. But during the third take, his gun misfired. Carradine didn't pause. He hurled the weapon across the room and dove over the table, tackling his co-star in a spontaneous burst of fury. Tables shattered, glass flew. The other actor, caught completely off guard, tried to fight back only to be shoved into a support beam. The cameras, rolling the whole time, captured every second. Walter Hill didn't stop the take. Later, reviewing the footage, Hill decided it was too powerful to cut. The chaos, the intensity, it felt real. Because it was. The actor Carradine hit refused to speak to him for the rest of the shoot. The bruise he left, visible in the next scene. Sometimes the best moments in film aren't improvised. They're uncontrollable. Fact #7. One bullet was real, and no one is allowed to talk about it. On most sets, the line between fiction and danger is clearly marked, especially when it comes to firearms. But during the chaotic filming of the Northfield ambush sequence, one round wasn't a blank. A frustrated armorer, trying to solve a persistent issue with muzzle flash, made a reckless decision. Load a single live round into a long-barrel rifle for one wide shot, pointed far from cast and crew. The idea was to capture an authentic fireburst. He didn't tell anyone. The shot went off. No one was harmed, but the sound was different, sharper, unfiltered. Within hours, rumors spread. One actor reportedly refused to hold a weapon for the rest of the day. The technician vanished from the production before the week ended. The footage? Never used. Walter Hill called it unacceptable realism. Not because it didn't work, but because it could have ended everything. Sometimes danger isn't in the frame. It's in the assumption that everything's under control. Fact #8. Costume design turned into battlefield forensics. The bullet wounds in The Long Riders weren't just wardrobe details, they were miniature crime scenes. The costume team dug into Civil War autopsy reports and 19th century surgical records, trying to recreate how bullets actually tore through fabric and flesh. They studied how wool burned from powder flash, how blood spread on raw cotton, how different calibers left different exit marks. The result? Wardrobe choices that had forensic logic, not just visual flair. Some jackets had layers of false lining to simulate internal bleeding. Shirts were torn by hand, burned at the edges, then soaked with period-authentic blood recipes made from food, dye, and gelatin. The camera barely lingers on these details, but they exist, layered and hidden, worn by actors who carried each hole like a death sentence waiting to happen. Realism, in this case, wasn't visual, it was anatomical. Fact #9. A river scene almost became a real drowning, and no one yelled, "Cut!" Midway through the film, there's a crossing. Muddy waters, nervous horses, gang members guiding their way through current and stone, and in that moment, Robert Carradine vanished underwater. Heavy rainfall the night before had turned a shallow stream into a dangerous flow. When Carradine's horse stumbled, he was thrown headfirst into the river, his belt snagged on the saddle horn, his boots filled with water. Seconds passed, then more. The cameras kept rolling. A safety diver finally noticed something was wrong and jumped in. Carradine was pulled out coughing, breathless but conscious. He waved off medical attention and insisted the scene continue. Later, when Walter Hill saw the playback, he didn't flinch. What made it into the film wasn't a performance. It was panic, filmed with perfect lighting. Sometimes the most cinematic moments are the ones no one planned or wanted. Fact Hasson 0. A real fight broke out on camera and it wasn't scripted. Shooting a Western about outlaw brothers is one thing. Hiring actual brothers to play them is another. During a high-tension scene between gang members, the underlying family tension finally snapped. David and Keith Carradine threw real punches. It started with a disagreement over placement. David stepped too far into Keith's light. Words followed, then a shove. Before anyone could step in, fists flew. No stunt doubles, no direction, just years of unresolved sibling heat erupting in front of two rolling cameras. No one said cut. The crew watched in stunned silence. One assistant director reportedly started to intervene, then stopped, unsure whether it was real or a brilliant improvisation. It was real. Walter Hill reviewed the footage later. His verdict? Too personal. The scene was never used. But it changed everything after that, especially between the brothers. Fact Hassono. The ending changed because of a nameless grave. Originally, The Long Riders was meant to close with a classic shot, riders vanishing into open country, leaving legend in their wake. But during a location scout, Walter Hill came across a forgotten cemetery outside a small Missouri town. Among the weeds and half-sunken stones, one patch of dirt stood bare. No name, no date, just a depression in the earth. Local historians claimed it was Jim Younger's. That silence spoke louder than any line of dialogue. Hill rewrote the ending on the spot. Gone were the triumphant exits. Instead, the final image became one of decay graves melting back into soil, names erased by time, the aftermath of outlaw fame. You don't ride into the sunset when the earth forgets your name, you sink. Fact Hasson 2. A faulty gun turned into character psychology. Dennis Quaid's revolver wasn't reliable. During early takes, the hammer stuck, the cylinder misaligned, it misfired when it shouldn't, and clicked when it should have boomed. Props offered to swap it out. Quaid declined. He saw something in the weapon's unreliability that fit his character nervous, impulsive, less sure of himself than the other gang members. He incorporated it into every scene. A second glance before firing, a twitch, a moment of hesitation before pulling the trigger. In one take, the gun jammed again. Frustrated, Quaid slammed it on the bar mid-shot. Hill kept it. That moment made the character feel unpredictable, vulnerable, even in violence. It wasn't on the page, but it's there in every frame where the gun refuses to cooperate. Sometimes the prop shapes the man. Fact Hasson 3. The original title felt like Shakespeare, so they killed it. Before it became The Long Riders, the project carried a different name, Blood and Brotherhood. It was a title designed to evoke tragedy, legacy, and familial loyalty turned fatal. The studio hated it. Executives claimed it sounded like a war memoir or worse, a stage play. "We're not selling Macbeth on horseback," one memo reportedly read. Walter Hill, though initially fond of the poetic weight, agreed the title lacked punch. It didn't feel lean. It didn't feel like dust and distance. So they stripped it down. The Long Riders was born. The irony? That working title still shows up on early draft scripts and abandoned marketing materials. A few vintage teaser ads even made it into trade publications before being pulled. The film never changed. Only the words above the poster did. Fact Hasson 4. A single photograph inspired an entire subplot, then vanished without a trace. In the research phase, the team uncovered a strange relic, a tintype photograph of a woman dressed in mourning, seated beside a closed coffin, draped in a gun belt and boots, scribbled on the back, "To Frank, a promise kept." That image haunted the writers. They created a fictional character, an unnamed woman who secretly assists the gang, repaying a childhood vow. Scenes were written. A role was cast. One haunting moment was filmed at dusk as she buries a blood-soaked coat in silence. Then came test screenings. The subplot confused audiences. The pacing dragged. Hill made the call to cut every frame. The actress's name never made the credits. The footage is nowhere to be found. But the photograph still exists in a private collection, framed behind glass. Some ghosts don't haunt the screen. They linger behind the scenes. Fact Hasson 5. One of the horses disappeared and returned. Altered. Halfway through production, a trained stallion scheduled for a pivotal tracking shot vanished overnight. No gate was left open, no hoof prints leading away, just an empty stall. Crew searched for hours. At dawn, a call came from a ranch 3 miles away. The horse had wandered into a private pasture, calm and uninjured. The owner said it walked in like it knew the place, but when returned to set, the horse had changed. It didn't respond to commands. It avoided eye contact with its handler. Its timing was off. The once dependable animal now flinched at cues and refused certain direction. Eventually, it was removed from lead scenes and used only in background shots. What happened during those missing hours? No one knows, but the wrangler who trained him later said, he came back different, and not just in body. Fact #X. They didn't fake the broken glass, they engineered it to hurt. Western bar fights are iconic. Smashing bottles is practically a ritual. Most films use sugar glass, harmless, fragile, visually effective. The Long Riders chose something else. Custom-poured resin bottles, darkened with whiskey tint and finished with real liquor to create a natural sheen under low lighting. They shattered better, but they also cut deeper. In one take, a bottle cracked sideways and drove a sharp edge across a stunt performer's cheek. The wound wasn't scripted, but Hill kept the cameras rolling. The blood mixed with stage grime. The actor stayed in character. The take stayed in the film. After that, the rules changed. No more glass-to-face strikes, but the philosophy remained. This wasn't a sanitized version of the Old West. It was sharp, gritty, slightly unsafe, and the props could draw blood as easily as the script. Fact #7. A nameless extra left behind something more honest than the script. He was just another background blur, one of dozens in a crowd scene. But someone on set noticed his wedding ring glinting under the hot lights. An assistant director asked him to remove it, period, accuracy and all. He shook his head. It's the only part of her I've got left. No one pressed further. Walter Hill made a quiet decision. He moved the camera to catch the man's hand as it dropped to his side. Later, in post-production, a line was added in voiceover. He never took it off, not even after she passed. It's 1 second, maybe less. You'd miss it unless you knew. But in a film filled with myth, that was something real. And sometimes, reality finds its way into fiction by refusing to follow direction. Fact #8. The gunshots came from a crime scene, just not this one. There's a rawness to the sound of gunfire in The Long Riders, a dryness, a slap of air, no cinematic echo. That's because many of the gun sounds weren't designed. They were archived recordings, taken from actual FBI surveillance tapes, from Depression-era shootouts. Some of the audio was distorted. Some came from reel-to-reel field logs never intended for public use. But Hill and his sound team layered them into the mix beneath blanks, beneath Foley effects, giving the film an auditory texture that felt unearthed, not engineered. The legality? Murky. The result? Disturbingly authentic. The bullets you hear don't belong to Jesse James, but they were real, and they once tore through walls, cars, and men in silence that now echoes through film. Fact #9. The most legendary shot in the film wasn't storyboarded, it was stolen from the Sunday. Every Western needs an image that lingers. A silhouette, a trail, a sky on fire. For the Long Riders, that shot wasn't planned. It wasn't lit. It wasn't blocked. It was caught. Late one afternoon, after principal shooting had wrapped for the day, dust began to roll through the valley. The sun dropped faster than forecast. A camera operator, still lingering near the main rig, turned toward the horizon and saw something strange. Riders moving in slow formation, shadows converging, time folding. He called Hill without shouting. Just, "You might want to see this," Hill saw, and without hesitation, told the actors to mount up and ride. No instructions, no marks, no script, just instinct. That improvised moment became the heart of the film's marketing. It's the image used in retrospectives, trailers, and behind every retrospective article about the Long Riders. Because sometimes, the most iconic frames don't come from design. They come from surrendering to something bigger than the lens. Fact #20. One town refused to screen the film because the outlaws felt too human. Across most of America, the Long Riders played without controversy. But in one southern town, never publicly named, a local theater quietly canceled all showing. The reason wasn't profanity or blood. It was sympathy. The local sheriff previewed the film and objected to its tone. Not its violence, but its empathy. These outlaws, he claimed, were too noble, too restrained. "You've made Jesse James look like a martyr," he said. Church leaders echoed the concern. The theater pulled the film the same day tickets were printed. Walter Hill declined to comment directly, but later told a reporter, "We didn't glamorize anything, we just refused to judge them." To this day, that town's cinema never screened the film, not once. Not because of what it showed, but because of what it refused to condemn. Bonus fact, a man watched the filming for days, then claimed Jesse James was his blood. During a stretch of filming in Arkansas, a quiet man began showing up near the catering tents. He didn't speak to the cast. He never crossed into restricted areas, but he stood close enough to see every take involving the James gang, and he never missed a day. Crew thought he was local, someone's uncle, maybe a nearby rancher curious about the production. Then someone asked him who he was. "I'm family," he said. "Not to anyone here, but to Jesse." He didn't elaborate, just smiled. Someone passed word to the Keach brothers. Hill heard about it too. One brief conversation happened off camera, undocumented. The man refused to give his last name, saying only, "I just wanted to see if you got it right." He vanished the next day. No ID, no credit, no one could confirm his claim. But one assistant swore she later traced his lineage through an obscure branch of the James family tree. Nothing definitive, just enough to wonder. If true, it means one of Jesse James's actual descendants stood just outside the frame, watching strangers reimagine his family's myth. Not correcting them, not protesting, just watching. Quiet, focused, as if waiting to see whether cinema would preserve a legend or rewrite it. If the truth behind the Long Riders surprised you, know this: there are dozens of films hiding equally strange shadows just beneath their frames. Subscribe for deeper dives into the stories no one told and the ones they tried to bury. But before you go, was this film a myth faithfully honored by blood, or just another Hollywood illusion that got too close to its subject? Tell us in the comments. And while you're there, which film's behind-the-scenes secrets do you want next?